Today we're going to be talking about how we're bringing adaptive noise canceling into code scanning with Semgrep. First, allow me to introduce myself a little bit. My name is David Whitlow. I am a recovering engineer who has done a lot of work in the IT and infrastructure security spaces. By daylight these days, I spend my time trying to help people improve the security of their applications with code scanning, namely Semgrep. And by moonlight, I have two young girls that are deep into the Disney princess phase, which I really am enjoying a lot. And I want to give a shout out Moana 2 for anybody that made it there or hasn't yet. It is definitely worth it. I'm also an aspiring kickball player. I'm a 7-time champ in a local league here, though I'll be honest, our season right now is not getting off to a great start. So, if you can wish me good luck, I will appreciate that. And that said, let's start to jump in here a little bit. First, I want to introduce just a little bit about Semgrep. We have an AppSec platform that really is a platform for helping drive a shift left program with secure guardrails to help build up your code scanning practice and hopefully really fix issues. We really have two foundational elements that help that we build upon in the platform. First off is our Pro engine. This is our rules-based engine that we use for analyzing software. It's really great. You can customize it. It does a lot of sophisticated detection and also is very expressive in how that you can write patterns with it. Secondly, we also have our managed scanning platform, which essentially makes it really easy to connect to where your code is and immediately start scanning all your projects and start finding bugs. On top of those, we deliver what are the three products. So these are the three pieces of what you can purchase when you come to Semgrep. We have Semgrep Code. This is our SAST product. We have Semgrep Supply Chain, which is our offering in the SCA space. And then we have Semgrep Secrets, which is what it sounds like on the tin. This is what we do looking for credentials and secrets sitting around in code. And then on top of all of these, we have something we call Semgrep Assistant. This is our generative AI powered context analysis engine that also we use for kind of really lots of pieces that we'll talk through here and trying to figure out what are the most important things for you to fix and then what should you also do about them. And so this is the Semgrep AppSec platform that underlies everything that we'll kind of be talking about and where you would drive all of this from. Now, as we start to get into this a little bit, I want to lay out some of the just overall problems with code scanning. Now, these are things that I think everybody here is probably very familiar with, but I just want to orient some of the challenges that we generally deal with. First off, code scanning is just hard. Understanding code is difficult. It's not the same everywhere from one organization to another, as everybody kind of develops their own practices and stuff. And so generally speaking, the problem set itself of just trying to understand it and do good analysis of it is difficult. Secondly, it is really difficult because product bugs have direct customer impact. And so the fact that these bugs are out there is really scary and can possibly introduce a lot of risk, especially if you're dealing with sensitive information, from your customers or in your applications. In general, bad tools and poor implementations can be both mind-numbing and completely soul-crushing when you're trying to actually go through this. This is because, one, evaluating the results of a tool can be really difficult. When you get a finding and you want to go through it to try to validate it or figure it out, that can be challenging to just understand what's happening. And then it can totally be soul-crushing because even once you figure it out, you may have identified some sort of reason that maybe this is not that important, or maybe you have another control in place that's actually dealing with it or so forth. So both, it can be very high effort to try to go do things. And then two, it can be really difficult to find things that are meaningful in terms of the risk they present to your organization. To do that, we've all tried to adopt a shift left philosophy and get to developers earlier so that they can try to deal with these issues while they're actually in development. But the reality is that developers already have a day job and that they are trying to get a lot of things done. And they probably feel like my buddy, the monkey over here on the right-hand side, where we've just got lots happening, and it's just so difficult to keep up with all of it. And now you start getting inundated with security alerts that may not always be of the highest quality, and it really can be a challenging situation. So that's kind of the world that we live in, that we're trying to go through. Semgrep works through trying to help with this by first off having a really high quality set of detections and things that we run, and also trying to give you a set of mechanisms in each space that we do code scanning to help really pick out what are the highest quality and top level alerts that we want to go drill into. Here from the Semgrep Code product, I'm showing a couple of things. So in Semgrep Code, we have this concept of confidence, where every rule that we're going to run is going to have a confidence value associated with it. And so in this case, I'm sitting here and I'm kind of drilling in to specifically show me my applications that are internal facing, maybe only the detections that are high confidence, and then filter those down for only the things that we picked up with the Pro engine. And so now it gives me a couple of different things where not only severity, but I have a couple of other different thresholds that I can use to try to figure out which ones are actually the most impactful that I should start with first. Secondly, when I look at the SCA space and I talk about what we do there, we have a concept of what we call reachability analysis. This effectively is we will release rules that will scan your first-party code to figure out whether or not you are using dangerous dependencies or vulnerable dependencies that have security vulnerabilities in them, and are you using them in a dangerous way? So not just are you on a bad version of the dependency, of course we're going to tell you that, but additionally we are going to actually look through how you use it in your code, and we can tell you the ones that are actually reachable, where you are exposing those vulnerabilities out to your customers and your applications. Lastly, in the third product we have, Semgrep Secrets, we have a concept of what we call validation, where when we discover secrets in code, what we're going to do is take those values, and if, for instance, if I found a GitHub token in source code, I'm actually going to contact GitHub, interact with their API, try to use that token to do something, and then based on what I see from it, I can tell you whether or not that token is still live or not. And so this way, not only can I help you pinpoint where secrets are in your code base, but I can tell you the ones that are actually active and able to be used for exploits, so that you can put those at the top of the list. And so those are some of what we have. The other thing that we think is on top of this, on top of having these layers of extra context that we use to try to really help you pinpoint what are the priority findings that you should deal with first, we also think that it is extremely important to be able to control what are the things that I'm actually sending out to my developers. And so here I'm showing you where we have this concept of rule modes. These are where, down to the individual detection level of what Semgrep is looking for, I can tell Semgrep what I want it to do in the event that it finds something. And so if I'm going to work from the bottom up, in this case, I have the option to be able to actually tell it, okay, well, let's say I have a rule that I'm very confident in and that is very, very scary for me. That is something that I might put into this blocking mode. So what that's going to do is, in the event that it sees code getting developed, we're going to run a scan. As soon as a developer opens a PR, we're going to go look at all the new things they've done and see what risk that might have introduced. And in the event that a rule would flag, in that case, we'd actually put a big red X on the check that we'd put up, such that you can use that to actually prevent them from merging it until that issue is resolved. Now, that's something that creates a ton of friction, and it's going to be a real challenge for some people. One of the things that we think is really important, though, is to be able to give you this control. So I don't have to block developers, but what I can do, and what I see most teams actually do, is they use this behavior in the middle that we call comment. This is where I'm going to inform developers about the risk that I think that I've detected, but I'm not going to stop them. So I'm going to give it up to them to be able to make decisions about whether they need to address that or not. And then the last option that I have in here, monitor, this is subtle, but I actually think is really a superpower. This is the ability for Semgrep to be able to detect that issue, to be able to report it here back into our portal, but to actually do nothing in terms of interacting with the developer. And this is super, super helpful when we're first getting started running scans and trying to really understand the tool and how it's interacting with my code base. It's a fantastic way that you can launch out in really a silent mode new detections or the program as a whole, I can understand what Semgrep's going to do, and then I can make decisions about what are the things that I actually want to start interacting with developers on or showing to them. But this is 2024, and everybody is curious about, this is great that I've told you about how Semgrep is really doing, a good job in code scanning from the beginning, and how we have, this texture and the different ways that we look at things. But where did the AI actually come up into this? And so this is, I think this is funny. This was me trying to get GPT to give me an image of a robot John Travolta, lost in Pulp Fiction. And while it wasn't exactly what I was asking for, I thought it did get to the point of what I was trying to say here. And so let me take you into a little bit more of what we talked about in terms of what we call Semgrep Assistant. So Semgrep Assistant plugs into several stages of this process to try to make sure that you're getting just the absolute, best information that we can, and help you really drive fixes out of these results. So we start really with the scan process, that everything I've just described. So Semgrep does an amazing job at really producing deterministic results and giving you exactly the kind of findings and stuff that we look for in the code base. So we start from that. Once the scan is complete and Semgrep has results that it thinks it has, we're going to then use Semgrep Assistant to go review that and really be the first line of defense and kind of investigating and helping you figure out what to do. So the first thing that Semgrep Assistant is going to do is it's going to do what we call auto triage. This is where it's going to review those findings, and it's going to look for extra context and stuff in the code base that might suggest something is actually safe or maybe a false positive. And what we've actually seen is, even just out of the box, Semgrep Assistant can reduce noise by as much as 30%. So this is reducing the number of findings that come out by saying, actually, here's a good reason that we think this situation maybe doesn't apply that Semgrep thought at first. And so that's great. So now once we are able to remove a set of findings that we think maybe were managed by something else in code, or maybe were just a mismatch from what Semgrep put together, next we're going to try to add extra context in that to, well, what code is the most important for where we found issues? And this we called tagging, and we introduced the concept of tags based on what files are doing. And so when Semgrep has identified that we think there's a security issue within code or within a file, what we're going to actually do is then go look around the file for markers of what might be really important. So if it's dealing with things like PII or financial transactions or this type of stuff, those are things that you actually probably want to address bugs with first. And then for things that might be in scripts or other kind of stuff or internal services, maybe you get to those later. And so now that we've kind of prioritized across where we think the most important issues are, the last thing that kind of comes in here is we have what we call our AI autofix. This is where Semgrep Assistant will actually, given all of the context we've seen, it will actually generate code suggestions around how a developer might actually be able to mitigate the vulnerability that we flagged to them. So let's step a little bit further into kind of each of these. The first thing I'm going to go to here is actually how we surface this up. So let's say that we had set something into comment, and a developer has now opened a pull request. It's been scanned by Semgrep, and we've identified something that we want to flag to them. In this case, we've actually identified some code that we think is introducing a SQL injection vulnerability. And so this is what the developer is going to see. So they're going to see a comment in their pull request. So we think it's absolutely important to meet them where they are, so that it's efficient and easy for them to be able to follow and react to this. And so at first they're going to get a comment in the pull request that's going to come from our platform. In this case, you can see it's kind of flagged the code that we've looked at. It's given a data flow graph here where the data flow engine is traced from element to element where this bad user data has come from, and so forth. And then what's going to come along after that, so this is the first thing they see is, hey, we think we've found this bug. And then secondly is what's going to come from Semgrep Assistant. So here you can see it comes as a second follow-on message. It says, in this case, Semgrep Assistant is suggesting the following fix. It's saying use SQLize, which is the framework that it just happened to pick up, was what I was using for interacting with the database. Use SQLize parameterized queries instead of string concatenation. So sounds great. You can see here, this is where it starts to give me that suggestion around the code fix of what I can do here. And so I've got this generated code. You can see Semgrep A1 picked up really well what the issue was, where it's saying here the criteria is getting concatenated into my SQL statement, so that's a problem. And so you can see here, it both understood the framework, it understood my query, it understood how to use the framework to do the correct thing here, to actually how to set and parameterize this query. And so now I actually have something that's fantastic. I'd be happy to go ahead and commit this into, and I can just click here to go do that. Additionally, maybe I didn't completely understand what Semgrep was trying to tell me or what this meant. And so this is where we also will generate what we call remediation guidance to help understand that code fix. So here you can see I have an expandable section where I can go out and see step by step what's important here and what did this matter and what actually is the transformation that we're taking place. And it gives me a little bit broader view of even the issue and stuff here. So these are really great in terms of an auto fix and what comes in here. So that's a fantastic experience. But some things, if I were to tell you that a 1,000-pound tiger was about to pounce on a little child, I'll be honest, my heart rate kind of goes up. I start to freak out a little bit. But if I show you this picture on the right-hand side, that actually is something that I immediately understand it was something that was safe to ignore based on the context around it. I can see the gate, I can see the tag that tells me the zoo, I see the big glass fence and enclosure that actually has the tiger in there. And I now feel way, way better than maybe if I just heard that at the beginning. And so I want to go through a little bit of how we can, this is really kind of getting to the core concept of what we put this around the adaptive noise canceling. And so let me go into what this looks like. So first, I'm going to go through a quick code example that actually is inspired by a live service I had working with a customer recently. In their code base, they described themselves as generally being crazy about proxies. And so they had this service that essentially does something really simple. It actually just receives a request and effectively proxies it to another service. So you can see here we have a URL that is coming in off of the request or that I'm parsing out of the request query. Then later on, I'm actually posting a separate request to that URL. And so this, in general, is what you would call SSRF. And so this is what Semgrep would actually flag this code. So Semgrep is saying, hey, you have untrusted input coming from your client request that actually, if it's used to build a request, can lead to SSRF, and in case kind of looks like it here. It does also give me some guidance to say, hey, when user input is absolutely required here, or necessary to do this, what you want to do is perform strict input validation on it. But if you actually looked a little bit more at the example of what I was just showing up here, you may have noticed that I actually have this utility that is doing this validate proxy request. And so now this was something that obviously was custom that I had built and added in here, and that Semgrep actually didn't understand and was not a part of the rule that we ran here out of the beginning. And so what I would want to do here, now this is also, again, directly from GitHub. You can see I also get this set of options of how I can give Semgrep information about what I want to do. And in this case, I'm actually going to use the /fp to tell Semgrep that this, in fact, was a false positive in terms of the match that it picked up. Now, what I wrote here, so I did the /fp to start with, and then I would give it kind of a general statement. Now I'm giving it a little bit broader of a context than maybe what you would get from a developer on their very first time interacting with this, because I really want to let Semgrep Assistant and Semgrep to get a lot of mileage out of the input that I'm giving it here. So I really want to tell it, what is going on. So I'm saying we generally do some sort of validation on user input. And specifically in this case, I have this utility that is one of the tools at making this finding safe to ignore. And so you can see here, I would get some feedback from the platform that's going to tell you, okay, we understand what you've done here, acknowledged, and then I would resolve the conversation and so forth. And now this is the part where I wanted, this starts to become adaptive. I don't know how many of you have maybe had a pet or a dog that was really into playing fetch. I've been blessed to have one. And she's really interesting, where sometimes, when I start throwing the ball, she starts to see what's going on and get a little bit ahead of me, and she'll take off before I've actually thrown it. And now that's tiring for me. And obviously that's the person I'm most concerned with. And so what sometimes you do is you'll pump fake with them and that kind of thing. But she is actually really, really sharp. And once that's happened about once or twice, then, fool me once, shame on me. But from there out, she's picked up on it. Now she's watching me really closely. That's actually exactly what I want out of my code scanning tool, right? So I want it, okay, if it's going to flag something once that I'm not that happy with, but what I really want it to do is to listen to me and respond going forward. So now in this case, I'm going to show a slightly different example. Very, very similar code. I'm going to run through the same process that we did before. In this case, now I'm actually going to change a little bit of the utility and the function that I have here to have a different name that wasn't actually included in the guidance and stuff that I had done. But this time, when Semgrep Assistant runs it, it's going to come back with a separate comment. It's going to say, we think this is safe to ignore, and then it's going to give me its reasoning why. And so in this case, it's going to say the code actually uses a function named checkSafe in this case to validate this, and indicating it's likely a mechanism in place to make sure the URL is safe. And this makes this less of a security concern. So one, I've now picked up a lot of context from what I've heard previously from developers. So I'm using that to now help refine the type of recommendations that we're going to make about that, both here in the triage sense to help suppress noise, as well as in the remediation steps and stuff that would come up from there. So obviously in this case, I feel heard, I feel loved. I'm excited to smash the like button that we've got here. That, of course, will help reinforce on the back end what we're seeing from stuff. And so we are really excited about that. And this is what we call assistant memories. And so the idea here is, while my cube may have changed for my monkey buddy, now he does have a friend on there, his elephant pal, who's never going to forget a great tip that he's received back. And that's what assistant memories are all about. It's all about our ability to retain this information that you're giving us and then apply it in the right place. And so in this case, I'm going to demonstrate what I would actually do with the type of guidance that we had given it. That would be something that maybe I want to apply to specific areas or not. So like one thing that we realize is really, really important about this concept is that it's so powerful that you need to make sure that both there's a good governance structure as well as a good targeting mechanism for where do these things apply to. And as it sits in product today, one thing that you would notice is that when you create memories with Semgrep, they actually will be really closely scoped. They're scoped to the specific repository and the specific rule that you're giving feedback on. That's one of the things that we are changing here, and I'm showing in this. Now, I will say this is a mock of what this is going to look like here soon, so this may change a little bit when it comes out. But this is stuff that we can do with you today, working with our team. And so in this case, what I'm showing is I'm tagging. I'm using a tagging mechanism that would describe all of my projects. I've a little over 3,000 shown here that I would describe as internal services. And so these are ones where maybe I'm more comfortable with Semgrep Assistant being a little more assertive in knocking down some of the findings or removing things or helping me prioritize. And I've taken this guidance that I've done and I've applied it to all of the SSRF rules that we have. And so this way I can be confident about the guidance that I've given it and that it's getting applied to the right detections and to the places where I think it's safe to do so. Next, what I've done in this case is actually the opposite of that. In this case, I'm actually giving guidance to Semgrep to say, on my external tagged projects, these are the ones where I think maybe are my highest risk. These are the ones, and I'm applying this to all SQL injection rules. Maybe I think SQL injection is actually one of my biggest concerns for my external facing applications. And I don't ever want Semgrep Assistant to tell a developer that they're false positives. I want to make sure that people really go through all of the example and the detail and make sure they do their due diligence, again, because these are my highest risk apps. Next, I have a concept here of where another thing that I've seen from the wild was I had a customer that actually had a runtime framework that they would store encrypted values in their source code that would actually get decrypted by this framework in runtime. And so when they were scanning for secrets in particular, what they would actually see is an awful lot of noise. And so so what we did was we actually created a memory for Semgrep Assistant that said, hey, in this case, I called it decryptonite. I said decryptonite is actually a value where we actually will keep that information in there. And so this way, Semgrep could actually recognize this framework that was completely custom and internally built And whenever we would see usages of it around what we thought looked like secrets, those were things that then we could understand were in fact these encrypted values. And this reduced, by the way, the amount of alerts and stuff they had by something like 40% out of the secrets and stuff that we found. And so it really started to understand their code base and dial into it. And then the very last example that I have to touch on here is going to be around this one. This is where I'm tagging something as migration pending. And so this is actually something different. It's actually not even using necessarily in a security context, but one thing you can do, Semgrep is completely customizable in terms of the things that you have it look for. And in this case, we're actually looking for where I'm introducing a new UI framework that requires specific references to be defined for it. So I've made a rule that helps allocate that. And then now I've created a memory that can help give guidance to developers when they're now using the new UI framework. If they're missing something or they're trying to migrate their applications, we can use Semgrep Assistant to both surface documentation or give them examples of the code and also help, do those refactors that we use, from those fix suggestions and so forth. So that's a lot of what we're doing with AI memories and a couple of ideas of how we see customers using them. I'm going to quickly recap here about everything that we've got, inside of the Semgrep Assistant box. So this is everything that comes from the AI-powered engine, and then we'll come over to questions and stuff here in just a moment. So here, going through those, first off, the thing that we think is at the top is as Semgrep has finished its scan stuff, the first thing that we're going to do is help to mitigate noise, right? To help drill down findings that we think are likely not exploitable, or maybe could have been a mismatch to start with. Once we've done that, we're going to help generate remediation guidance, help tell your developers what they should do about this issue that we flagged to them, and even give them, suggestions on refactored code. We have the concept of assistant memories that we just talked about, where we can really tailor and triage and add our own context into these prompt chains so that we can really tailor that guidance to exactly what you want for your organization. And then we also have a couple other things. So we have a couple of things we didn't touch on here. One, Semgrep Assistant actually flows into the rule creation process. So like I said, you can create your own Semgrep rules. Semgrep Assistant gives you the option to where you can describe what you want the rule to do, as well as provide some code samples of what good code looks like or what bad code looks like. And Semgrep Assistant can help you get started in drafting and generate those rules. And then lastly, we also have a concept that we call the priority inbox. This is where we will analyze all of the alerts that we've surfaced for you, and we will pick the things that we think are most relevant and most important and just put them at the very top so that if you need somewhere to start, then we'll give you some suggestions. All right, thank you everyone so much for listening to the presentation and for coming in here. This is where we're going to come over to the chat and look a little bit at some of the questions and stuff that might be still outstanding. I've got one that came over here that is asking about what are the actual ML models that we use and implemented in the AI? And that's actually a really great question, and something that we've generally designed to want to give you some control over. By default, Semgrep uses OpenAI as our base model provider. Now, we have some fine-tuning and things that we've done in that process, and so that's what you're going to get included with the product. So Semgrep Assistant comes with the other things that we have, and so that's what we're going to use. Now, we do also recognize that many organizations work closely with an AI provider, or maybe they are, maybe you work with Anthropic or Google or one of these other organizations that also have great models. And those are things that we do allow you to configure, so you can bring your own provider on the back end. And the ones that we support today are if you want to bring your own OpenAI key, you can do that. Or if you use them through Azure, you can do that as well. Google Gemini is one that you can also configure. And then AWS Bedrock is kind of the last one that we have in there. Now, obviously, AWS Bedrock, you can run many different foundation models and stuff from. So it's really more of an infrastructure for running these base models that you can use on that. And so if that's something that you're interested in, you can do that in product, or certainly please reach out to to us or the team to let us know. Come to our community Slack, of course, is one place that you can come to talk to us about this too. I will comment one thing about our relationship with OpenAI. They do, in general, have a zero data retention program that is not something that you get by default. That is something that Semgrep has So all of the data that we run through OpenAI is something that they do not retain any information for. And so that is one thing to watch closely when you're looking at this. See, I've got another question here. Great question. So the question here is, what type of data sets have you used for fine tuning and training of the base models exactly? That's going to totally be honestly data from our information. So basically based from our customers and our research team's experience. Part of how we interact with the models and how we build our prompts does include a lot of information from the Semgrep rules and content that we have about them. And so that's a lot of how we tune is to how does it understand what we're doing, and also what do we think the right actions and stuff are. So like our research team, how would they fix an injection vulnerability or recommend doing something for a specific framework? So those are a lot of the inputs and things that go into that. One of the things that I should say explicitly is not ever shared or used to train the model is any of the code or example or specific like findings from any of our customers. We in general are highly cognizant of the risks of data leakage through models between customers, and so we have chosen to not ever use any of that data, to be explicit that we don't want information to cross across customer bounds. And so everything we use is anonymous and not specific, and definitely never includes code information from our customers. Let's see, that's what I have questions left over. Let me see if we have anything else going on in the chat. Again, thanks everybody so much for your time and attention and stuff here. I'm going to scroll around and see if we have anything going on here. Look out, Superman. My favorite comment so far in the chat. Let's see, I'm not seeing other questions. So the question here, the next question I've got is, for further training, do we store the factual information that we receive from feedback from real auditors? Now, those are things that we keep, and those are things that we review. They don't go directly to the models and that kind of stuff. So we do provide, essentially a human layer of research between what is going to come in and feedback in the product and what goes directly into it. So again, that way we help manage this risk of kind of information leakage or AI prompt injection kind of stuff. Because really, when we talk about the memories and stuff that we're showing, we really are talking about allowing you to inject information into the prompt. And so the way that we really try to manage that is just by keeping a very clean separation of customer information and the models in general. Great question on this one. So then the next question was, how much in percentage does the AI help in reducing noise? Now, this obviously, in general, when I talk about findings and scan times and percentages, we are always really careful to try to put as many asterisks on the front end, because performance of this kind of stuff really varies from code base to code base and, and company to company. That said, let me tell you what I generally see. So out of the box, I will generally see a reduction of somewhere between 10 to 30% in terms of findings. And so again, that depends on the findings. It depends on what's happening and so forth. But in general, I will see a range somewhere like that. Now, what I've seen when we've gone through tuning things is, in particular, I've seen a really big uptick. So sometimes, for instance, I had some examples I went through with a customer where we did some really A/B tests with these memories that we kind of had created. And candidly, this was a quick evaluation. We had worked with them for about 2 weeks or so when we were really hands-on with it. But what we had done is, so they had gone through and triaged a lot of findings and kind of given us their commentary. And then through a couple of different types of issues, we generated these memories. And so I remember for one class of issue, they had a pattern where they would, as a way of how they would reset client-side cookies, they would actually just set the age of them to 0 and then let them go out. Well, so they would set a lot of these cookies that would kind of immediately expire. One of the things Semgrep was flagging on them was the fact that they weren't setting some of the security attributes, same site and so forth, on them because they immediately expired. And that was what Semgrep flagged, which was kind of interesting because it's both it's valid in terms of the actual code we were looking at. They weren't setting those values. But B, we didn't really care because of the fact that the cookies immediately expired, and that actually was their practice of how they reset them. And so we made a memory about that said, hey, when this cookie is getting used to, or you're setting the cookie in a way such to delete it, then that's something that we actually think is safe and that we can ignore. And that then went from those sets of rules that had originally triggered those issues had about a 10% safe rate, if you want to call it that, in terms of what the AI had seen. And after we had given it the memory, then it actually went to about a 35% safe rate in terms of what it was. So you think that was actually like about 25% or so of those findings in general were because they had this practice internally. And that's the thing that's so fun, honestly, I think about this is as you make these memories and we can start to rerun them with this new context, like seeing how much of an impact does that make. I'll be honest, I am lobbying heavily internally. I want the game mode where I make memories and see the findings essentially get rerun and get to kind of look at them. Because I think one thing that everyone in here, I would love your support in trying to make happen would be, I really want Tanya Janka to play, Findings Feud, like Family Feud with Semgrep AI. To be able to do just that. I want to see someone write a memory, and I want to see what the impact on a set of findings might be. And I think that would be a really fun time. And so if y'all think so too, please, blow us up on social to say you want to see it happen. But so that's one example. I had other examples with their findings where we actually went from almost from 10 or 15% to start with to actually over 50% in some cases, where some of the guidance we gave it in those cases were names of services and stuff that we thought were safe. So we'd have, a finding like this injection one that we showed in the presentation where the actual data that was dynamic or being fetched was actually coming from another internal service that they considered to be totally trusted. And so as we started to itemize some of those and explain those to Semgrep Assistant, that also drove a really big impact in terms of the findings. So in some of those cases, we went from 5 or 10% of what are generally really good rules and were really accurate matches to help flag about half of them would say would be things that they would consider safe to ignore or not high enough priority to really go address. So I've seen it range basically from 10% to 20, 30% to over 50%. And honestly, I felt like we could have kept going in some of those cases. Let's see what else we've got in the chat or any other questions. I think the one big comment I would have about that is I'm really excited about this. Obviously, it's new stuff that we're putting into the product. And so, for those that are really interested in the fixed rates and the impact that we can have, I would just really encourage y'all to come work with us and try, because this is something we will absolutely do for you as we go through, a proof of value with the product and stuff as we test it. So we'd love to try it. Let's see. So I've got one follow-up here that was, I put something for a human layer between detection and showing issues. Can you give something more on that? So what I guess when I was commenting about that, I was thinking mostly around the way that we take feedback that we see from the real world in terms of how people triage findings and what they think about it, and how we take that information into the fine-tuning process and stuff that we do with the model. And so I guess let me separate a couple of different places of where there are human layers and stuff in the loop. In general, we generally do keep humans in the loop, like even how we showed in the PR flow, where we kind of will inform you around what we think based on the AI outcome, but then we're really informing the developer and trying to empower them with the best information to make decisions at that point. And so we do really believe in that model. Though we've seen actually, especially with this and the auto triage, we've seen it highly effective. Generally speaking, like well over 95% in terms of how our research team will kind of drill into them and look at them. So we generally agree very, very highly with it. And so that's something that we're going to be doing some stuff to make that a little more integrated to where you can kind of choose some of that. I should, keep as much of the stuff that is not out yet, in our back pocket as I can. But obviously, I'm really excited about, the features and stuff that we have in here. And so we do that a lot. So Semgrep has a big internal research team. Obviously, we do that, to be able to make our rules and write our detection and shape our products. And so a lot of what that team does right now is spend a lot of very close attention to the AI review. What is it doing? How accurate do we think it is? How good is the guidance that we think we're getting out of it? And help to help iterate and train that, because it's obviously something that scales super, super well when you can just, take 1 million findings and run it through this thing and then knock a big chunk of them off. So a next question we just had come in are kind of, what are the challenges in trying to apply these noise canceling techniques to software code scanning? I think what I would say is always the biggest challenge in general with a lot of this code scanning in general is just that, we are looking for needles in haystacks in general, and that is hard to do. Code is hard to understand. It is hard to do this stuff accurately. It is hard to understand, what the things that you don't know when you go in to start with. And there's always a tension between, trying to be very accurate. Like, for instance, we could be 100% accurate, but we could only detect one issue, and so that type of thing versus we could be less accurate, but try to detect lots and lots of different types of issues. And so I think that's just an inherent tension in code scanning in general, is the trade-off between, the risk of false negatives that you're going to leave out there and the risk of false positive that you're going to pick up as you go through that. In general, Semgrep does have a bias toward what I think is the true positive, meaning that we generally bias toward accurate results that we think are actionable in exchange for accepting the fact that there may be some issues that we don't pick up or those kind of things, or that to pick up, we want you to customize the tool to some extent to be able to understand and broaden out. I think that generally applies to the same thing here with the AI, is that I think there's an opportunity for you to, for instance, I could go in and just tell it to never, raise any issues, and that, would limit the noise, but it certainly would also limit, the risk that I would pick up. And so I think that, making sure that you are paying attention to the impact of the things that you're putting in or not, I think that's really the biggest trade-off, I would say, in general, that you need to watch for and just be careful about, because it's a power tool. You can cut a finger off if you're not careful. Let's see. Are there tools or frameworks, this is an interesting question, that integrate adaptive learning into code scanning? We're not there yet. So at this point in time, like, I do think that's very much where we're going. Like, when I was kind of joking about how I want the gamified mode of kind of going through my findings and kind of tuning the AI and seeing what it does, and kind of that being the game of it. I'm pretty bullish on that, and I would love for us to do something like that, which I think would then help put some of the tooling of what, and of course you could imagine a future where we use the AI to review your code base or something in general and make suggestions around types of rules or these types of things. Though all of that is science fiction at this moment, and in terms of what we have. But I do think that the bigger and better the models get, the cheaper they get to run, the more you're going to see us applying this everywhere. And anytime that we are trying many things with it, and when we see positive signs, we do try to move quickly to get that into the product. You may have noticed, if you've been following closely, we've had some sense of Semgrep Assistant in the product since, I want to say, spring of 23. And so we've been very early in trying to adopt and push this, because we do think it's an extremely powerful technology, and has been very beneficial, as y'all have heard, and what we've seen on the ground. Let's see, that was tools or frameworks. Where am I at? Sorry, questions are coming in. I'm not keeping up. Henry, your question was kind of what's the benefit here? And I guess what I'm calling noise is generally the idea of false positives are in the mix. So in general, with all code scanning, there's kind of a component of accurate issues that we pick up, and then there's a component of things that maybe we match that were inaccurate. And then I would say there's a big gray area in the middle that is the what do I care about or not. Because some things, like some of the situations we've described, can be accurate in terms of the detection that they picked up, but maybe they're mitigated by some other control, or it's on an internal facing dev tool that nobody is ever going to see or has no access to sensitive info. And so it's just below the bar in terms of what you're going to spend time fixing. And so I would say the big promise of reducing noise is helping to just manage how many things you look at that you don't care about or wouldn't fix. And so that way we can suppress them so that you spend less time reviewing issues and trying to find which ones are worth looking at, and more time actually fixing the ones that you do care about. What are examples of real-world apps where noise canceling has been metaphorically applied to the software process? I'd lean back on this one to talk about some of what we laid out in terms of the cookie stuff and the encryption stuff. All of the examples that I've given in here are live examples that I've done for real with customers' code bases and seen productive impact on. And so these have not been just my total brainchild as much as these have been real things that we have done. I think very similar. So there's a kind of a follow-up question of what are the examples and how is this, similar to anomaly detection? I would just describe a lot of this as similar to other types of security detection in general, in that, there's ambiguity around what we're looking for. That is a hard problem to get to accuracy from, and you're kind of always dealing with some, inherent degree of error in the system. I think code scanning really fits very similar, like how you might think about a SIM or that type of practice. I think is very similar to other types of security monitoring. So I would just say this is our vehicle for trying to allow you to more easily incorporate the context that you see. So like when you see the thing and you see the tiger in the cage, if you could just tell it like, hey, if it's in a cage, it's fine, and so that's the thing that I think is so powerful about memories, is the fact that it's just in English. Now you can give us code samples and all that kind of stuff in it also, and even for that matter, I should say I've seen customers make memories to tell Semgrep Assistant to reply in other languages, right? To reply in Spanish or Portuguese or these types of things. And so it's just really, really powerful what these models can do. And it's excellent at looking at code, but it also just has a lot of other utility around how you want to see it, what other information you want to get included into the prompt that they have and that kind of stuff. And so it's just a very scalable, very easy tool. I had a question in here that was kind of around how do we think about Semgrep and Solidity and stuff. In general, we do support it. I haven't worked deeply with it myself, so I can't comment deeply about it compared to these other tools that you're describing. But in general, I'm pretty sure that we do, in terms of being able to write rules and build things around it and so forth. And so that is something I would encourage you to do. And if you have questions, like I say, please come over. We have a community Slack channel that everybody could and should join if you're playing with Semgrep, because we do have channels where you can get help from us as well as our community around writing rules or catching up issues or that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see us experiment with some of this blockchain stuff and that kind of thing too. There are a lot of really good questions in here about other types of things that maybe could fit into being able to help do other types of noise canceling. I would say all of those are decent ideas and stuff. Though a lot of the times I think that for us, we've always had the idea of being able to customize the rules themselves. So I would put that kind of in the hard mode, but very precise, in that you have to learn Semgrep and you have to understand the rule, and you can go into it and really explicitly tell Semgrep what to consider or not. The thing that I think is so good about this is that now it allows you to describe context in a way that is much more flexible. And that's the thing that I think is so powerful about the LLMs, is that ability to pick up context, and it's so cheap to do it that where if I'm going to customize the rule, I need to test the rule, I need to make sure that it matches to some things but not other things, and so forth. So I kind of have this whole really like almost SDLC style process that I need to go through in quality vetting it, where I can do the same thing here, but like my iteration time is much faster because it's so much easier for me to write and that kind of stuff to begin with. That doesn't mean that I think that's always the best place. Like there still are excellent examples of where I can do something in a rule. For instance, if I wanted to exclude a set of files and say, just don't look at these files for this rule, that's much easier for me to do in the rule. That will make my scans faster and all this kind of stuff, as opposed to doing it in a post-process analysis like I'm doing here. Though there are a lot of ups and downs and benefits to both, but I do think there could be more stuff there. It's interesting. There are a lot of really good questions in here that I think are teasing at the analogy where we're talking about adaptive noise canceling. And so I love actually the ideas that are kind of coming through some of this. Some of it, like, how does transparency mode, relate here in terms of doing this? I would almost call that almost like what I would say in terms of like the blocking or something. So like when we do set things to like block, those are things that as we are going to be allowing you to just say assistant suppress things in general in the background, one of the things we want to do is make sure that we don't do that on something that's really critical. And so that's where that block mechanism will come in. So it kind of will give you this context of, okay, maybe that's the conversation. If I want to say the thing that's really important that I don't want active noise canceling to pick up would be actually from that. That would be one of the things that I would kind of say there in terms of how do I think the analogy carries through. Let's see. Now, I do want to emphasize though that that is completely an analogy and not the actual like technology or something that we have in the system here. One of the things, there's a question here about how this type of thing can help improve collaboration between teams. One of the things that I think is really cool about Semgrep in general is the idea that teams can write their own detections. So even as teams develop patterns and architectures and stuff that are specific to how they want to do things, those are things that you can codify with Semgrep also. And those are things that the assistant then can come in and help explain and help people refactor and stuff. So like when we had the example about the UI migration or something that we were doing, those are things that I do think can really come up. And then when you think about the scoping of that, this is where, well, do I want to scope that just to the repos that my team works on? Or is this something that maybe you work in a dev happiness function or something like that, or developer tooling, and your responsibility is to help make other developers faster. So this is where I would think about your ability to pick up, well, what are the problems they get stuck on? What are the things that they don't know how to use? Maybe you have an internal wrapper or tool built for something, but they're still, using a native parser or something that you've run into. And so that might be an example where you can then create memories that are intended to help other teams actually address those situations when they run into them. So that way you can both flag, hey, we have a better way for you to do this. And then B, the memories and stuff that you've created can actually help generate the code that will help them use it. And so that's where you can, that would be one way I would say that you can, be using Semgrep, or even, I would say this is in a smaller percent, but maybe like my top 5% of my customers or something. A lot of times I will actually see where their development teams are actually the people that write more rules than like the security teams do, just because that they've gotten used to Semgrep, they've gotten used to the idea of using it as a communication vehicle. And now as you start to add this stuff into it, it just makes that a lot more powerful. Let me scroll up a little more. One thing, there is one question here about this for environments that were previously inaccessible. Would this make this more helpful there? I'm actually going to use this for a moment to just talk about where all of this stuff happens, because one of the things that is interesting or important about it is this does happen as a post process, and this does have to interactively use our AI providers. And so we do have to be able to fetch source code and to be able to post it to these other systems as a part of it. Now, I talked about how we don't do any data retention on that, and Semgrep in general does not store your source code. We access it ephemerally, essentially always. But I do want to underscore, though, that for those that are in really sensitive environments, maybe some of you work in military context or financials and stuff like this, where like data literally can never leave your premise. Maybe that's actually still physical for some of you. Those are things that we would want to talk through. So like we'd either need to figure out, in general, you're not going to be able to consume a lot of this because it still does need to go to the cloud for us today. Though that said, I'd love feedback on some of that for where that's really important and where that's a key limiter for you. I do have some customers who that is the case for, and I would love to see us make that more accessible. So if you're in that boat, I would love to hear from you if this is something that you think could be high value for you. Let's see. I'm going to scan. A lot of these are kind of similar in some of the things we've touched on, so I'm not going to necessarily go to every one, but I'm going to keep looking here to see where there are some things that are kind of different. I'd say there's one question just around what are some of the successful implementations. I just would underscore that all of the examples that I gave you all today were things that came out of real life engagements with customers. And so honestly, the best way to start this, in my opinion, is to just do a scan or to get started, because once you see the results to start with, and then you start to engage with them, I think those are the things that will give you the types of prompts and things that you want to go and add into it to help iterate and make it better. And so that's where I just think, number one, get in there, start looking at stuff. And I actually think this is it almost makes this most beneficial, is the fact that now you can actually get leverage out of looking at your findings. So I actually think that 2025 may be the first year where it's actually fun to go through and triage your code scanning results, because I think as you do it, you're going to see the impact that it will have on the rest of the pile in the backlog. And I just think that's going to be really motivating and exciting and fun. And so that's my bold claim for next year, is I think it's going to be the year where triaging SAST findings is fun. That's a good question. So I had a question around whether or not Semgrep's analysis actually uses the AI for the issue detection or not. And so I'll maybe underscore this. So in general, think of Semgrep and our application of AI as a kind of as a second stage to a scan. So think of stage one being really where Semgrep is going to do its thing. It is going to scan code. It has rules. Those are always going to produce the exact same findings. So we think this is being deterministic in the set of issues that we're going to pick up. And so that is where what I would say is kind of the first thing to note. And so that we do not use AI in the actual issue detection. We may use it to help make rules or help us do things, but in general, we are putting out a specific set of rules that are always going to have the same behavior on a given code base to find the set of issues that we start with. And then we will review them in stage two with the AI to help figure out whether we think they are accurate, and then help you figure out what to do about them. And so essentially, we're always deterministic in the issues that we find. And if you choose to use AI or not is actually totally up to you. And then when you do, that's when it actually kind of folds into the process. Now, this is rare, but I'm going to give everybody a heads up that we are actually on time at 10 o'clock in terms of what our time frame is here. And so I'm going to turn into a pumpkin very shortly. But I'm going to try to make a quick skim and see if there's one last set of questions or something I maybe can give quick answers to before we go on. But again, please, everybody, feel free to email us. Feel free to come to our community Slack and ask more questions. We obviously would love to hear from you and make sure that you understand what we're doing and how we can try to help you get the most mileage out of the tool that we can.